My name is Sam Hansen, and this is the very first Critical Thinker Society podcast. So thank you for joining us. The aim of this podcast, hopefully it educates a lot of people. Hopefully a lot of people find this interesting. As this is the very first one we've ever done. Hopefully it turns out well. And we look to do a lot more of these in the future. So today my guest is Marc Clapton.
G'day, thanks for having me.
No worries, man. So we got a pretty cool lineup to talk about. We're going to be talking about the Q phenomenon and the situation over in the United States. Then we'll be chatting about the Kim.com's recent Twitter updates. After that, we'll go into Julian Assange, give an update on the Ecuadorian embassy situation. Then we'll talk about Australia's position in the TPP, and if we have time, maybe we'll get into the ability to grow your own food and living off the land. So, without further ado, let's get stuck into the good stuff. One of the most interesting things on the internet lately over the past 2 years has been the Q phenomenon. So ever since the Trump administration won the election, and I think it was even before that, Q had been posting on 4chan and 8chan and basically disclosing a lot of the behind the scenes information to the public domain. In your opinion, Mark, even though Q has remained anonymous, who do you actually think is behind these Q drops?
Who is Q? I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it. My personal opinion is that it's definitely someone embedded with the White House. The level of insider information they're getting as to where Trump is and what's going to happen in the coming week tells me that it's definitely someone that's either walking the corridors or inside the Oval Office.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wrote about this quite a lot in my book, the idea of this civil war occurring behind the scenes within the deep state. So once the Trump administration actually came into power, you had these old establishment globalists with the Hillary Clinton faction, all sorts of different criminal cabals. And once they actually lost the election, they lost this political and judicial immunity that they would have had if Hillary was president. And so I think now they're actually fighting for survival, really. And the Q movement itself is to me, I think it's part of this dissemination of information into the public sphere. So those on the outside looking into this deep system can actually get a picture of what's actually going on.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of taking that further, if you go back 5 years, and we sort of saw the anonymous movement starting to build momentum and start to affect a little bit of change and actually getting people out on the street protesting with the million mask marches and all that sort of stuff. Then you saw what seemed to be the deep state come in and tear those groups up from the inside with all their infighting and all the LARPs that were in there trying to sabotage those groups. Those people that were in there for the right reasons have now sort of taken on board this Q phenomenon.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's been this great revival of this spread of information on how the deep state actually works. Ever since you go back to the Edward Snowden revelations, which revealed the NSA mass surveillance, that was really the first picture like the public domain actually had into this secretive world operating behind the scenes of national security. And so before that, it was anyone who actually just thought or talked about these things was called a conspiracy theorist. Or
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that these big government bodies sort of weren't clever enough to keep up with the pace of the internet was sort of the way that I was interpreting it. And up until that point, with sort of where I was at with being sort of unplugged from the matrix, that these people weren't spying on us and all that. And then once the Snowden documents were sort of released, I know that's when I started to really start paying attention.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the internet has been an absolute blessing in the spread of information and the crumbling of the old monopolies of propaganda and mind control, which the old establishment used to possess. But now I think when you have these big tech giants now, and with the mass surveillance of the internet, I think it's doing the reverse. It's sort of switching this free expression and thought into this more conformist controlling system, which I titled in my book the Matrix as well. So
yeah. Well, really, it's such a in 2019. That's really the way I see it. Is it's more people are becoming sort of unplugged sort of on a daily basis and starting to realise what is taking place.
And to me, bringing it back to Q, I think Q is one of the bringing the information to the public. You know, the idea that the public interest has a right to know what the deep state's up to, because I think most of us feel that the deep state's no longer in our interest. They're heading towards this fascist dictatorship scenario, and it's I think you'd have to be crazy to go along with it. And I think a lot of people inside the intelligence community themselves are saying, "Nah, this is crazy. We don't want to go along with these plans." But like we were chatting about earlier, it's part of this. It's part of the upper echelons who are really controlling the deep state, not the middle management.
Yes, that's that 1 to 2% sort of those 3-letter organisations that are sort of controlling the narrative, and the vast majority of the ones doing the work on the ground have their hearts in the right place.
One of the things that has been circulating on the internet is the idea of this upcoming mass arrest type scenario. You know, you have all these sealed indictments, and there's a lot of rumors about Guantanamo Bay actually being prepared as this like de facto military prison. Do you think we're heading towards like a mass arrest type scenario of factions of the deep state?
Yeah, most definitely. Just to premise your question, what is an indictment? An indictment is something that was created when the mafia they were trying to take down the mafia as a way of trying to seal all the cracks and leaks within the organisations that were putting legal cases against the mafia to take down the mafia. It was a way that they could create this case, like this case folder, and they would actually put anywhere between 1 to 40 people in each indictment, and then that could be sealed court records. Once they collect enough information and evidence to build their case, then once they know that they can take down all elements within that case in one go, and they had enough to try in court, the records would be unsealed, and the FBI, the police, they'd all be sent out to go and make the arrests. Over probably the last 15 months, I think it was, there's been 80, last count, which I checked, I think I saw 2 days ago, they're up to over 80,000 sealed indictments. And I'll say that again, that there could be between one person and 40 people on average. It can be higher, it can be lower, but 1 to 40 people in each sealed indictment. There's 80,000 sealed indictments. So that's insane amount of people.
Well, to me, these indictments, it's the evidence that there is this civil war occurring behind the scenes within the deep state. And to me, I think one of the heads of the other faction of the deep state was this Clinton nexus, you know. When she actually lost the election, she lost the political and the judicial protection which she would have had as president, and now they're absolutely. They're going to have to pay for all these crimes that they've been committing for years.
Well, the whole structure of those systems were geared to make sure that she would win that election. You know, and because they'd weaponised mainstream media. As everybody, even now here in Australia, we still see a lot of negative press on Trump. And I know I must be a Trump supporter in the background there, but you can see it. You can see the venom anytime his name's mentioned in the mainstream media. But everyone seems to forget he's actually making change, bringing jobs back to the country, all this. So that's what they were sort of against, was he has come in and broken their 10, 15, 20-year power play that's been going on to line all these dominoes up to then knock them down. And sort of Hillary coming into that position of power was going to be sort of the crown and the jewel in the crown, if you like.
Exactly. It would have continued on their system of control, their system of power. Okay, so moving on to very recent news, the US government has actually been in shutdown for the last 3 weeks, and I think one of the biggest things about that was I think the number was 800,000 federal employees are going without a paycheck. And in a country where I can't remember the number, but it was more than half of the population was actually living paycheck to paycheck. It's such an absolute squeeze on the working classes and the poor classes of America. And so I think this is sort of the scenario. And if you have these international bankers actually looking to create some sort of economic crash or crises type situation, this whole wall debate could be one of the premises for it.
See, I kind of think that it's gotten to the stage where, look at all the evidence that's coming forward with all these thousands of migrants coming across the border. Trump's policy is not to try and stop people coming into the country full stop. He's trying to stop the illegals coming illegally across the border, so that they're not living in the country getting welfare, but they're not a registered citizen.
Well, in my perspective, the whole situation he's been dealing with now has actually been orchestrated and engineered for a long period of time.
We'll go back to the election, though. We're actually using people coming across the border illegally to then sign them up to then vote for Hillary. That was all part of there. That's why they didn't want them to be, they were happy to have the free flow of people across the border for that reason. They were getting more votes.
Well, you definitely you have the war on drugs, which has been going for so long, which has converted most of their countries into basically narco-terrorist states. So where the families are facing gang violence or intimidation or coercion, and they have no choice but to flee the country. So it's part of these longer term agendas which have culminated in in the situation we're facing today.
But look at all the evidence of the CIA running drugs across the border. And then that's then sent overseas as part of in wealth and exchange with other terror organisations stuff as part of in Black Ops. It's all documented. You can go Google search, find all that. It's nothing secret.
No, well, Gary Webb was the famous reporter that blew the lid on the the Nicaraguan Contra scandal. But you have things like the Fast and the Furious scandal, where they were bringing drugs in and then they were shipping guns out. And so you create a system which incentivizes the violence and the gang warfare, and then at the same time you're perpetuating the system and you're giving them weapons and all sorts of things. So it's part of the structures at play.
And at some point, where does the line get drawn? And the lines have been blurred for so many decades. When's enough?
To me, the Q phenomenon is about providing the information to the public about these larger deep state issues which have been going on for decades, really. And I think it's the first time that that the public has been actually able to witness what's been going on behind the scenes. Yeah,
definitely. And with the mainstream media not sort of reporting truth anymore, it's more about agendas and propaganda. I think sort of the people have been really needing that direction, and to actually know what's going on.
Yeah, well, I think in the age of new media, and that's what I'd love to turn this podcast into, the idea of being able to discuss the things that the mainstream media is deliberately avoiding. So, so hopefully it turns out well. All right, let's move on to the next subject. All right, our second bit of news today is Kim.com, the famous creator of the site Mega Upload, has had a very interesting January tweet session. So let's read some of his tweets now. I smile every day watching the aftermath of preventing Hillary. Deep state exposed, fake news exposed, DOJ and FBI exposed. I'm happy you are more informed than ever. 2019 will reveal so much more. Get ready for the next round of leaks. Monumental stuff. To me, this idea that the next round of leaks, monumental stuff, is he hinting that there's some sort of Snowden-esque level of leaks coming out? Because if it's true, my God, we could be facing God knows what.
Well, that's right. But it also depends, is he referring to Q drops, or is he referring to Snowden, or more revelations with WikiLeaks? It's open-ended.
Yeah, well, Kim.com was hinting very strongly when the DNC leak came out that it wasn't a hack. It was actually just a guy with a memory stick. And so a lot of people are still asking, well, who was the DNC leak? To me, I think it was Seth Rich, but
without a doubt, without a doubt. A lot of the talk from forums and groups on Facebook and that I've sort of been looking into when all that went down with the Seth Rich murder. There's lots of that case that didn't add up. That the media were calling it a mugging. They were saying that had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton at all. Yet the mugger didn't take his Apple Watch, didn't take his iPhone, and didn't take his wallet.
Yeah, the Seth Rich murder is a political corruption at the highest levels for sure. Let's take a look at his second tweet. This year, the criminals who run the deep state will be exposed. The shareholders profiting from war and chaos. The billionaires who turn democracy into an illusion. They own politicians, judges, and all your data. They are the biggest pirates in history. Want to know who they are. And so, that last statement, want to know who they are, is it like this disclosure of the highest levels of the deep state type scenario?
Yeah, he seems like he's fairly legit and does have his finger on the pulse. So I'll be curious to know what sort of intel he may have that we don't yet.
Yeah, well, to me, Kim.com he's one of the pioneers for internet freedom for the longest time, and to me, I think he's on the inside as far inside as an outsider can be, and I think he definitely knows a lot. And so when he says stuff is coming, like, it just spurs my curiosity of what actually it could be, and it's I think we really just got to stay awake and just keep our eyes out, Okay, another interesting phenomenon that's been happening is the Dark Overlord Hacker Collective has recently publicized a ransom for what was it, 2 million in Bitcoin. Otherwise, they're going to release 9/11 truths. Do you think this group is legitimate, or?
Yeah, well, there's legit and then there's legit. You've got the fact that they are legit hackers. Yes, they're accessing servers and getting access to files. One instance, they hacked into a medical facility and got a whole heap of photos and medical records of people that had gone in for breast implants and managed to get all their before and after breast implant shots. So there's no doubt that these guys can get access to servers and access intel. Whether they have anything legit, I haven't started digging through any of the data yet as to what's happened with this 9/11 first round of data dumps. But good on them. Good on them. They're trying to ransom some intel they've got, and that's sort of how it works.
Well, to me, like, the idea that they have this this proof that 9/11 was an inside job. See, for me, I've been saying it was an inside job for the past 3-4 years. I actually gave a 2-hour presentation at my university showing that I went through the evidence of a controlled demolition and the aftermath of the Patriot Act and the war in Afghanistan, showing that, and the failure of the NORAD defense system, of how it was an inside job. And so the idea that they have this, like, absolute proof which blows out the official story. Well, the official story has been it's been disproven for ages. People are just I think so many people have already seen through the facade, but I think this is just another level on the a bit more icing on the cake. But at the same time, like, if what would it accomplish if it gets released? Would they repeal the Patriot Act? Would they reverse back this war on terrorism? Well, I think we've already headed down the path. We're living in this world now where, for the establishment, the truth doesn't even matter. The truth is the lies they put out in the stories. That's for the mainstream consumption. Yeah,
well, and what happens when the genie does get out of the bottle? Because as you said, like, I also believe that was an inside job, that they worked with the Saudis to bring those towers down on a controlled demolition. You've only got to look at Tower Building 7 to see that there's no way that anything hit that, yet it fell exactly the same way that the other two buildings did. So it's good to see that there's some movement on. I know there's a group on Facebook I've seen, I can't recall it off the top of my head, that they've been doing some digging in. One of the courts in America has actually decided to reopen the case and actually look at some evidence supporting a controlled demolition. And that was sort of announced probably about a month and a half ago. So it's interesting now we're starting to see, probably in the last 2 to 3 weeks, we're starting to see this 9/11 Dark Overlord. Is it Dark Overlord? Yeah, Dark Overlord hacks now coming out. So whether this is all part of the trying to help build this case, who knows?
It could definitely be part of these mass arrests which seem to be coming up. So, okay, next topic. Julian Assange has been a bit quiet in the news lately. It still seems he's stuck in the Ecuadorian embassy, even though there are raising concerns that he actually might get extradited back to the United States. In your mind, Mark, do you think Assange will ever be able to escape the Ecuadorian embassy?
There's a lot of people wanting him dead, so he's definitely a marked man. As far as ever getting out of the embassy, again, there's talk on the net that he's already out of the embassy and currently in the US. With all this takedown that's happening and the indictments that are being played out or about to be played out, people are starting to sort of surmise that he might actually be stateside and is helping to add evidence to these indictments to sort of make watertight cases against all the deep state. So whether that is the case, I don't know. I personally like the idea. I think that's badass if that's happening. But who knows? As far as WikiLeaks goes, there's a lot of people thinking that for quite a while now that the WikiLeaks Twitter feed has sort of been taken over. That's now being sort of run by, CIA, Scotland Yard, whoever. Do you know what I mean? Like it's been compromised, which I think that's probably a fair assessment because what's his name? I can never remember his name. Lenin Moreno, the newly elected president of Ecuador. He's very against the whole Julian being there and his country having to pay for Julian sort of stay at the embassy, which has been many millions of dollars worth of Ecuadorian money used in his accommodation and staying there.
I think the Ecuadorians are under massive amounts of pressure from the US and external forces saying you can't get him because Julian is for what he's done for the last 6-7 years, especially he's completely changed the geopolitical sphere.
No, you're correct. He has. Like without a word of a lie, if it hadn't have been for WikiLeaks, Hillary would be the president of the United States.
Yeah, no, WikiLeaks, without the DNC leak and just that exposure of how, I'd say, rotten to the core the Democratic Party really was, I think a lot of people wouldn't have voted for Trump.
Well, see, if Seth Rich didn't have that avenue to have released that information, the way that the mainstream media is controlled, that information would never have seen the light of day. But because of the control measures Assange got in getting that information out to the people and vetting it to make sure it's correct and true, which WikiLeaks have a 10-year record of every piece of data they've ever released has been true 100%. No one's been able to say that's not true. So they're, unlike CNN having to retract their articles and stories quite regularly.
And I think that's one of the great things about WikiLeaks is that it's given the general public the insight into what the plutocrats and the real ruling powers of the world are actually up to, but they don't want us to know. It's sort of the material they're trying to keep suppressed, but it's in the public domain.
Well, in trying to keep an Australian theme to the WikiLeaks spin, look at Malcolm Turnbull being caught up in the Panama Papers, with him funneling money offshore, sort of dodging taxes. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not just isolated to Hillary Clinton and Umar Abedin and the Podesta brothers. It's not just isolated to those guys. It's global leaders.
Definitely. I think what he's done as well is provided a public service, I think if we didn't have this, you'd have governments around the world would be able to establish censorship regimes. And when they can control the information, that's when they can basically control the people.
Well, look at Google. Look at Google and Apple, with them now working with China in trying to, feather their nest and develop their businesses into China. But China have such a massive control on what people get access to data-wise that they call it, what's the term they use? The Great Firewall of China.
And then you come into this the 21st century of the technology of artificial intelligence and censorship, and we're heading towards this next layer of not only digital surveillance but digital censorship and information control. I think that society is going to need more systems like WikiLeaks, which can disperse this what's the word I'm after? Important material.
Yeah, well, and also protect the whistleblower. Not just integrity of the data, but also the people that are coming forward, so that they know that they're secure in being able to release this information, and they're not going to get a bullet to the back of the head.
Exactly, and if you look at in Australia in the last 5 years, a lot of these anti-terrorism laws have been about criminalising whistleblowers. And so there's 10-year jail sentences for whistleblowers, and I think it was the National Security Legislation Amendment. There's all sorts of penalties coming in, where at the same time governments are trying to control the information, but at the same time a lot of people are waking up and searching for the right information as well. So it's a...
Well, so that's why the US is so aggressively wanting to extradite Julian, is for that reason, is people within the intelligence community want him to pay for exposing them and making them look weak.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, he should be brought back to Australia and given full diplomatic immunity, because it's a public service he's provided. And without him, I think we would have been heading towards this dictatorship long ago. So one of the biggest things in Australian news, which isn't getting enough attention in the mainstream media, is the start of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So the TPP is one of the largest free trade agreements Australia has ever signed. And what it does, it basically radically overhauls the political and the economic situation for all the 11 countries inside it. And so to me, it's part of this global agenda to merge all the countries into a single union. So you can hypothetically think of the European Union. Well, the TPP is part of this Trans-Pacific Union, and they start with the economy, but pretty soon they'll move into the political side.
I think you sort of nailed it there. Is, from what I understand, is the TPP is basically an Asia Pacific sort of version of the European Union. And look at all the countries lining up to get out of the European Union right now. I think England's sort of trying to get out, but the EU's got their massive hooks into them, won't let them go, because they realise there's about another 6 or 7 countries sitting there sort of waiting to see what happens, because they're going to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's part of this globalist structure to remove individual nation states and actually combine them together into regions. And so once you have a region, you have the unelected bureaucracies able to actually control the whole thing.
Well, there's got to be an umbrella over the top of the whole lot, hasn't there? The push with all this sort of anti and pro immigration that's going on is, I believe, that's part of this long-term 10, 20-year strategy of the European Union and the likes, trying to break down the borders and sort of gain more of that control structure.
100%. One of the biggest features of the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the investor-state dispute mechanisms. So what these ISDS mechanisms are is that when a foreign corporation has its investments affected by the actions or the inactions of a sovereign government, they can actually take that sovereign government into an offshore trade tribunal and sue them for damages, for reparations. And to me, when you have these offshore overseas corporations able to control through effectively, it's through extortion, basically, because governments won't even be able to make any law which affects a foreign corporation. Well, that means you're no longer able to control your own country.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm talking to you on a MacBook with my Apple headphones. Look at Apple. Apple's doing exactly that.
It's a transnational corporation, using child minors assembled by slave labor, sold by minimum wage workers.
As much as I'm an Apple fanboy, yeah, it's exactly what they're doing.
part of the globalist supply chain, and I think every transnational corporation, I wrote about this a lot in my book, was the merger away from these sovereign economies into this larger transnational global system. And my degree was in international business, so it's basically how you can the profits and the ability to set up in the offshore international market just completely surpasses any national-based business. And I think a lot of national-based businesses, things like if you look at Dick Smith Foods, who was an absolute champion of Australian-made profits type scenario, he is unfortunately he's had to close down. I think it's a tragedy, and we're heading towards this. What are we heading towards? This global, completely global corporate system, and the TPP is the epitome of that. And I think if we want to have a sovereign country, we're going to need our own Brexit movement. We're going to need a sort of a leave the TPP movement to grow here in Australia. OzX. we got to work on the name, but there's got to be a TPP exit, because to me it's the worst trade deal Australia's ever signed.
Well, there's got to be a reason Trump pulled out of it. And that dude's a career businessman, and he saw it was a bad deal.
On to our next topic. One of the things me and you have in common, Mark, is we both love gardening. I actually saw one of your videos showing off your farm. Now, do you want to talk about that?
And I got myself a tattoo here, and that was sort of to be my daily reminder that research and learning and asking questions and question everything sort of is my sort of life motto. And that led me down the garden path, as it were, to understanding that our food system is totally backwards on how we look at food in 2019. At the time, it was a few years earlier. But I sort of came to the realisation that I needed to start growing my own food to understand a bit more of the food chain, see what would happen and how hard it is to grow food, and started off with a little garden bed in my backyard. And after a season of growing some stuff for me and the family, I realised that this is something I think I could probably make a few dollars on. So I decided that with a bit of research through YouTube, realised that I could make some money growing salad greens in the backyard and selling them to restaurants and cafes. So I turned over the entire backyard, put a couple of chooks in the one corner, and I've been growing and selling lettuce and rocket and radishes to cafes and restaurants.
Yeah, man. Well, to me, the one of the big understandings, like one of the processes of waking up, is when you discover that why is money required. You need money to buy food, you need money for shelter. Well, when you realize that it's the big corporations that actually control the food, and then you get your food through Woolworths and Coles. I think one of the biggest paths to freedom is actually the ability to grow your own food, the ability not to require currency to survive.
Yeah, exactly. And then back to the old the barter system. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got a dozen eggs, I need whatever, and go and swap some for a dozen eggs. Do you know what I mean? And that's happening with neighbours here in my street. That's what we're doing.
Well, for someone who's never grown anything before, do you think it's easy to get involved in, let's say, like a veggie patch and actually growing lettuce and things like that? Do you think the average person can do it?
Yeah, there's nothing to it. First thing to do is go to the nursery and pick up a couple of punnets of lettuce and whatever else you can find there that you're interested in. That's the other key thing. There's no point growing anything that you won't eat yourself. And then just stick them in the ground at home. Just keep watching them, keep watering them. You'll probably kill them. But the idea is you'll learn. You'll understand, well, that's not how I do that. But go back and do it again and you'll learn. And there's plenty of YouTube videos out there to learn. That's all I've done. And once you grow food, and if you've got kids and the kids get involved, that's when it starts to really, you start to understand what you're doing. because you're seeing the kids making connections going, oh, so it doesn't just come off the shelf at Coles. Ah, right. So we can go and pick a fresh salad to go with dinner then. Ah, cool. Can I go and cut it? And then the kids are eating the salads and stuff. So, yeah, definitely. If you haven't ever done it before and you've got a bit of dirt out in the backyard, definitely go and try it.
Me myself, I went and did willing workers on organic farms, the woofing. Oh, wow. Yeah, so that was absolutely great fun, man. I recommend that to everyone as well, just to get out on a farm and start, growing your own food and really getting back to nature type scenario, just for fun,
Well, you mentioned before about the like the control measures of the bigger corporations over the food, like even down to like now they've got genetically modified corn and even down to the seeds are now being controlled. So all the seed banks are being locked down and all this sort of stuff. So that's where I think if the big the power goes off, as good old tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists are saying, start learning some skills. Learn how to grow food. Learn how to collect water.
Yeah, to me, it's a requirement. It's the ability to survive without the supermarket, I think. Yeah. Well, that's the end of the very first Critical Thinker Society podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you've stayed this far, hopefully we can get this a regular thing, and we can have more informational and discussions happening in the future. So, Marc, a big thanks for being my very first guest on the podcast, man.
No, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I wish you all the best for the future podcasts. I'm looking forward to checking them out.
Thanks a lot, man. And thanks for all the listeners that were listening. If anyone's interested, I have written a book. It is A Sleeping Generation Awakens. You can actually buy it off my website. It's only $13. If you got a spare $13, I would really appreciate it. And I wish everyone all the best.